Welcome to part 18 of our multi-language adventure game. Today we're doing the C# version, and we're writing in a location class, and we're creating some location objects. So what I'm talking about here is the locations are the various cells or rooms or locations where your character can be and do things in. So in this one I will be creating 4 simple rooms just so that the character can move around between them. We won't be actually doing any movement in today's session. This is just creating the actual locations. So I'll just run through this to show you what it's currently doing. So as usual, it's asking whether we want to keep debug mode. Yes, we definitely do, because this is where it's going to show all the locations. That's the items that we were creating last time. Now we're going to press enter and this will show the locations. So here we are. We've now got 4 locations: hotel room, corridor, lift, and reception. So that's the key for each of the objects. Then each object has a description, and then a north, east, south and west door, which may or may not have anything in it. And then we've got the item required to get into that room. In this case we've got the key card is what needs to get into the hotel room. Then we've got the items that are inside that particular location. So I've just noticed what we should have had on the east side of our hotel room was the corridor, because if you look in the corridor, to the east we've got reception and to the west we've got hotel room. So there's obviously a little bug there which I will need to fix. In fact, I'll do that straight away. Right, found the error. It was in this section here, which we'll go through in a moment. I had put to north twice, and so obviously it was not picking up that exit. So let's start and run that again. So debug mode, yes. There's our items. That's better. So now we've got the hotel room with an exit to the east into the corridor. We've got a corridor with an exit to the east into the lift, and to the west back to the hotel room. Then the lift, which is on the east of the hotel of the corridor, that has an exit to the west back onto the corridor. No items in there. In here we've got, in the corridor, we've got a card, or key card actually, that should have a space in there. So we'll fix that now, and then that pretty much gives you all of the items there. So let's just stop and fix that lack of space there. So we are now in here. So we've got item that should do with a space there. I think that should do it. It might give us too many spaces. Okay, we'll soon tell. Let's hit the start button and see what happens. That appears to have worked. Yep, we've got the key card in there now, torch and book, so that's fine. So let's show you how this all works. So changes are starting in the program CS, which is the main where the main function main is. No changes in here. We haven't done anything different there. We've got a new class which I'll go through in fact, let's do the class now. This is the location class. This is quite a complex class. As you can see, quite a few things in there. So we've got the following properties: the name, description, and then the whatever location is to the north, east, south or west of it as being stored as a simple string here. So we're not trying to store the actual location object of its neighbours, just the string to its key. That's why I like to use dictionaries to store the various objects in, because that way all you need to keep reference to in any other objects is as a simple string of the key of that object, so that you can then get the object if you want to at a later date. Then there's a list here of items, which is any items that you might have inside that location, such as the keys or the books or the weapons or whatever. Then there's an item required here. This is for anything that you need to get into or out of. So this, for example, is the first one is a hotel room. We might need the key card to get get into that room. I've only made it kind of a one way, so the item required is to get in, not to get out. But and then finally, an enemy. If there's an enemy in the room, again, it would just be a string, which would be the key of any enemy. So the constructor here fills in all the details to these properties down here, and then we've got a method to add an item into the by checking whether the items list here already contains that item, and if not, we'll add it. Then we can remove an item, and again we check whether it contains it, and if so we can remove it. And then we've got the display location, which will be used later on when we're actually in the next section of the game. So we won't be using this code today. This will be used next time round when we're actually moving around the game and we want to show what's inside this particular location. We don't need those at the moment. Let's get rid of them. Don't need that either. Now it just tidies that up. So that's the class. Now the game class. There's a couple of new things here. We've got add to items was done last time, so that's already been done. We're not doing add to enemies and add to weapons just yet. So we've got this add to locations, so this has now been completed, and we're just adding all the various items and things into that room. We'll go through this as we step through it. Then there's a new function here called check locations, which again we'll go through. It's fairly complex, and that's the one that actually writes out, if we're in debug mode, all the stuff you saw earlier. Create default locations is a new one that we filled in. Default items we had already got. Display intro we already had. Format line we had. Get files we're not using yet. So the load game here, these three lines are the same. Now we've got this if create default locations. The reason for making it inside an if statement is if create default locations returns false, that means we've somehow messed up the loading of the game, and so it won't run. So this kind of tells you what's wrong, why it won't run. And if it does succeed, then we carry on as before, displaying the introduction and then modifying the player, which is what we did last time. So let's leave it with a stop sign here at the create default locations, and we'll show you how that works. So I'll press start. So debug mode is on. Do we want to keep it on? Yes, we do. So press N for that one. That's our default items. And now we're going to create our locations. So press F11. So we'll call this function inside game. And the first one is to call the add to locations, which is up here. I'll go back to that one in a minute. Which is going to add it to the dictionary. So we're going to add one with the key of hotel room. That's its description. That's the exits to the north, east, south, west. And then this is any items that are inside that location, in this case a torch and a book. And this is anything which is needed in order to allow you entry to that location. So let's step through this. So we're going to add that lot here. So if we hover over each of these, the name is hotel room, the description is a damp hotel room. To the north, empty string. To the east, corridor. To the south, empty string. To the west, empty string. List of items, we've got 2. Click on the items, you can see that we've got a torch and a book. The item required is the key card, and there's no enemy, that's an empty string. So we're now going to directly add this to the shared locations dictionary. So shared has got this dictionary called locations, which is exactly the same as the one that we created for items. So we're passing it the name, which will be used as the dictionary key, and then we're now creating the new object of type location by passing in those parameters. So this will now jump us into the location class itself. So let's press F11. So it's just come down. The only thing we gave a default value to was this list. So you saw it started off on this line here. This is relatively new, where you can assign to the auto properties and give them a default value. It's a more recent change in C#, which is very handy, so that we can now, if we're not passing it any kind of list, it will automatically be made as a new list. So all this does is to fill up the properties with each of the parameters that we're passing it. So let's just step through those. This is just the constructor. Okay, so you'll notice this line here, items count to is the torch and book. You may or may not have come across this, I think it's called a ternary operator. So what this basically says is, set the items list, which we created up here, as a new empty string, either to whatever we pass in items, but if we don't pass anything, if we pass null because there were no items, then this will instead create a new empty list. So in fact, I really could have not bothered to have put anything in here, because it will create a new list string anyway. So let's change that. Oh, I can't change it now because we're running in the middle of it, but this is very handy, so that if you're passed a null value, then you can then instead create a new list. So just bear that in mind. The ternary operator, it's kind of like almost an if else statement, but all built in one line. So, you know, if I'm given null, then do this instead. So, which is quite handy. Enemy, of course, would be an empty string, and that's pretty much it for that location. So if I now hover the mouse over, it shows me that shared locations has a count of 1. If I drop that down, it shows me that it's the hotel room, and that's the object. Then I can click on that. The key is hotel room, and the value is all the properties of that object. So this is where the C# really shows its stuff compared with what we were doing in Python and Lua. You can see every single thing inside that object that we have just created. So that's really, really helpful. So we've added that. The next thing is to create these next 3. So what we'll do is I'll just go straight down to there. That's it. So we've now created them all. So if I go back up to the shared locations, it now tells me that there's a count of 4. And there they are, the hotel room, corridor, lift and reception. And of course I can pick any single one of them and step through and get all of the properties of that object. So that's very useful. Now the next thing to do is to set the shared.current location, which is only a string value to one of these here. So I've chosen the hotel room, so that's where we're starting off. That's where our game starts. And then press F11, and it's now going to run this check locations function, which in turn returns us a true or false value. So we're going to return whatever this returns. So we'll press F11, and this goes into this, as you can see, static boolean check locations. And what this does is it goes through the locations that we have just created and checks whether there's been any errors. For example, I might have accidentally, when I was creating it, mistyped something down in the here, like I've got, say, hotel room here. I might have put hotels or hotel rooms or some kind of simple spelling mistake, and that will catch any keys that are given on the north, east, south or west that don't match with an actual location. So that's what this thing is here for. So we start off with two separate lists, empty lists, one called keys and one called wrong keys. In Python we had to run through to get this, where in fact we can do this. We can just put the shared locations keys as the kind of default for this list. Right, so the way this works is we're going to just get onto the correct line here. So we've created these two empty lists. The first one, of course, is the keys of our dictionary, hotel room, corridor, lift and reception, which is done very simply with this shared locations keys being passed in as the parameter to the new list string. So that's a very neat way of doing it. So the next thing we're going to be doing is to go through all of the keys in here and check. I'll just go start on that F11 here. So for each of the keys in there, we're going to add to this string available keys the actual keys value. So if I just quickly step through those, we're basically just producing a list of keys in string format. So if I now look at available keys, you can see hotel room, comma, corridor, comma, lift, comma, reception. So that's the keys. I haven't bothered to strip the last comma off the back. This is only for debugging purposes. So next we're checking to see whether the current location is empty string, and if it is, we're then going to write this message out to say that the current location has not been set and return false, so that the game will not run. So that one, obviously we had set the current location, it was the hotel room. So the next thing we're doing is we're going to see whether the keys contains the shared current location. So does it exist, in other words? So we've got these four keys, as we know, hotel room, corridor, lift, reception. We're going to see whether shared current location is in that set of keys. So if we press F11, and obviously it is, so there's no problem with that one. So again, we don't have to return false. Now the last check we're making is to see whether for each within the location that we have chosen, whether the value to the north contains a key, and if it does, whether that key actually exists in our set of keys. So if I just step through, we can explain things as there. So the first key value pair value is the Adventure 3 location, which is this one here, a damp hotel room. And we're checking whether the value to north is not an empty string. This is an empty string, so it's not going to check that. So we'll go down. Is the east, is that an empty string? I believe that's a corridor, so let's just check. Yep, view is a corridor there, so we'll check that. Now we're going to check whether the list of keys here, which is 4, which are these keys here, contains the value to east, and the value to east is corridor. So it's just checking whether the word corridor, which is stored in the location to east, is actually contained in those keys. If it's not, because we've misspelled it somewhere along, or when loading in a game from file we've messed up the text in the file and it doesn't exist, then this will add it to this list of wrong keys. So hopefully this will skip past that, which it does. And we're going to go through that for each of the locations. So what we're hoping for is, once it's gone through all of them, is that our list of wrong keys is 0. So let's hit that, press the play button, and wrong keys count is 0. So we haven't done anything wrong with the putting the strings that are the keys to other locations are not wrong in any way there. If it was wrong, then it would tell us which ones were wrong. It will give us the list of available keys and the list of wrong keys, so that you could correct, for example, the text file that you're loading it in from, or even indeed if it was hard coded, to check the hard coding there. So let's move on from that one. Now, if shared debug is working, which it is, we're now going to print out onto a console a list of all of the locations. So it's quite complex here just to get those out. So first job, if we go to here, is I've discovered that a width of 112 columns with the current console font size that I've chosen for demonstration purposes is 112. So this is not something that should be a fixed amount. This just works for this demonstration. So we're going to set the console size to this width, 112 columns by 25. Currently it is, I believe it's 80. So if we hit that set window size, press F11, let's just check. It's already increased its size, as you can see. So it's a little bit bigger now. And then we can press F11 again, and then it's going to write these two lines on there. So let's show you those. So we cleared it, and then we wrote the dictionary shared location contains the following data. We've got a line ready to start. And now for each key value pair in shared locations, so for each dictionary item, we're going to get the description. Actually, I don't think we need this. No, we don't actually need these lines here now. No, we don't. So it's going to skip over those. This was something I was doing earlier, but it's no longer relevant, so I'll need to delete that. Let me just press the F11 key. So hopefully these will go through okay. So we're going to get the description straight from the key value pair value description, which is a damp hotel room. If I press F11, so that will print out key hotel room description, a damp hotel room. And then we go to the next line, and we're going to write whatever's value is to the east, which is probably nothing. So we've got north, nothing, east corridor. F11 again, then whatever's to the west, and then finally the item required. So we've got our 4 directions: north, east, south and west. The only one that's got a value is the east. And now we're going to write out whether an item is required to enter the room, followed by the items in the room. So we'll just press F11 for that one. And then we've got this here. I pressed F11 at the wrong point. There we are. So we've got the item required as a key card, and now we're about to write out the list of any items in that room by just going through this for each loop here. So if we press F11, it's going to write the item of the first one, items torch, go through that again. And that should read the next one, book. So we've got both those items there, and I think that's all that was in there. So that should, yep, a new line, and then finally a kind of tidying up line. here. So that's our first location with its key name, description, what's to the north, east, south and west, and the item required, which is the key card, and any items inside the room. So that shows you how this will now loop through again and do the next location. So that shows you how that's all working. We'll go to I'll actually let this run because it's going to wait for us to finish. So if I press continue there, probably got to stop on it somewhere. And it's now got all the data in place, and then the game continues as normal from there. So if we press enter, it's going to clear that and then carry on with the game. So that, I won't bother to go through all that. So that shows you how far we've got now, in that we've introduced the idea of having a location class and setting up some locations, and then putting out the description of those locations into the debug output there. So normally, of course, you wouldn't see this when the game is being played normally, because we would have had shared debug set to false. So this just gives you a way of checking how progress is going while you're doing your game. So I'll just go through so you can see all the additional lines that we've made again. So we'll start with the location class. So we've got these properties, then we've got the constructor here, then we've got an add item, remove item, which we haven't used yet, display location, which we haven't used yet. So that's the location class. Game, we have filled out the add to locations, and this new one, check locations. Including this debug side of it, so quite a lot of stuff in there. So we're getting into the more serious amounts of programming now just to get this game going, and we still can't move around in it, so that's the way it goes. Then the load game, again, we are checking whether we successfully created those default locations, and on from there. Shared, I don't think there's anything new in there. Nope, that's exactly the same as it was. So there's our two dictionaries of items and locations there, and there's our string current location. We haven't done anything to any of the other libraries, so that's it. So that's the C# version of getting our locations all ready to go.